Hello, and welcome to The Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, I'm going to have a conversation that's kind of unlike any other. For years, people have talked about Fetlife, the platform, the policies, the community. Today, I'm not here to talk about any of that. Instead, I'm sitting down with the man behind it all, John Baku. John has been at the center of the world for over a decade, shaping how we connect, how we share, how we explore, how we put our lives forward for others. But what does all that weight actually do to a person? What is it like when your name is synonymous with an entire community around the world? And how do you separate yourself from your private life to your public life, especially with a community that never sleeps? Today, it's not about algorithms or platform changes. This is about the man behind the machine. So let's get into it. John, thanks for taking the time out to be with me. I know we're trying to work through your busy schedule with all the things that you're doing. I know you don't do a lot of interviews, but I really appreciate you for sitting and taking the time to do this one with me.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this podcast.
I appreciate it. Well, it's partially even inspired by your platform. Initially, when you first launched long ago, my God, it feels like forever as a user. I remember coming to Fetlife and I looked around because at the time I was really quite invested on alt. And it was a mentor at the time who told me, oh, you should check out this place called Fetlife. And I remember coming in and I didn't recognize what it was. Like I couldn't understand it. And I kind of equated it back then to like a bulletin board system.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember looking around. I'm like, God, this seems like hard work. And I'm like, oh, well, it's not like alt. I can't search for anybody. And then so I left, which, obviously that wasn't the intention of it. And I remember my mentor got mad at me, was like, that's not what it's for. It's so you can connect with people and you can find your communities. And, that was back then when you're a lot younger and stupider, you don't really pay attention to other people. So I know a lot of people is a big deal. Your platform, that this behemoth giant that you created. Do you ever feel personally responsible for the experiences people have on Fetlife?
Well, yeah, definitely. I feel we all here feel we all here feel very responsible for it. That's why we take it extremely seriously. And it weighs on us and it hurts us when we get it wrong, or it weighs on us and hurts us when somebody gets hurt or somebody's upset with us. Even if we're comfortable with the decision or believe the decision we made was the right one, if somebody's not happy with it, it still affects us. We're still human. And the day that it stops affecting any of us, it's time for us to throw in the towel.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, they look at the platform and because you're so interactive with everybody, I think that there's a common belief that sometimes they have to understand separating the facts from the emotions, meaning if you're going to do something that's overall good for the majority of the platform, like before I started the show with John here, I brought up the recent metric system, so view counting on Fetlife, and I was telling him, and it's actually in some private emails, which started this whole thing, I had reached out and I said, thank you for doing it, because for me in my role, it allows me to know that a message I send out there may help somebody. I realize the frustration, but I mean, when you all look at those types of discussions online, how does that affect you and your team?
A lot. Even when something is received very well, it's still, there's going to be some people that still don't like it. And I don't know if it's, you're the one who has a degree in this stuff. So you could tell me, why is it that when, let's say, 5% of people dislike something and the overwhelming majority of people like something, why our minds focus on the few that dislike it, and it affects us and hurts us deeply?
I think sometimes we get involved in the groupthink, or we get somebody who's got a loud voice, which is fine. I understand the valid concerns, because I saw some of the things about, there's the harm. I countered with other psychology right behind it, because I've seen the arguments on these things. I think a lot of it is emotionally charged because you are so connected. You feel you're not Mark Zuckerberg. You're not sitting in the background just doing stuff and then I think that there is this perception that sometimes you're this megalomaniacal guy just raking in money, doesn't care about anybody, and all you want to be is liked and well received, and then you'll do something, and then that's it. And they don't understand how the decision process is being made, but sometimes they demand it.
A lot of people, before they get to know me and they get to meet me or see me on video, they think one thing and then understand something completely different afterwards. I understand that, like, the way I talk as an engineer, it's different. I understand that I'm misunderstood, but I can assure you, like, it's easy to say, but we deeply, deeply care. So you brought up the view counts. The view counts
Right.
is not a one and done. It's not a done deal where, people have said their piece and we're hoping them to disappear. We're still listening. And
Sure.
if the first thing I thought about when I woke up this morning was like, shit, like, we need to make a decision on these view counts. Is it time to pivot? Do we turn it off for everybody and only allow people who turn it on see it? Or do we do X or Y? Because we definitely get a lot of things wrong the first time. It's kind of like cooking, being a cook, like a chef.
Right.
You cook a grilled cheese for the first time and you're like, oh shit, I used the wrong cheese. I put too much butter, too little butter. Okay, I'm using grilled cheese as an example because that's as far as my
no, but it does work. It's a good analogy. Cooking's a great analogy because it's never perfect the first time.
So and a lot of times when we do something, we get it wrong the first time. But what I mean by getting wrong, it doesn't mean it's completely wrong. We just got some aspects of it wrong. And sometimes you don't know. We could have asked tons of people. We could have had tons of conversations internally. But for some odd reason, the second that we get it out there, we get different feedback or we get more feedback, which I think is great. Sometimes you need to put something out there to get people's feedback, to see what they say, to see how they like it. And sometimes we could ask before we ship something, and we do ask before we ship something. But a lot of times, even when you explain something to somebody, they're going to get preconceived notions. They're going to get fears. They're going to get all these things. And sometimes we just have to put it out there to say, like, hey, try this out for a day. Try this out for a week.
Sure.
See how it goes. Because we've seen things where people have, like, disliked it completely at the first day and then loved it over time, or the opposite,
AMA.
where they didn't. Yeah.
The AMA has been an interesting thing. That's a love-hate relationship that I see evolve.
AMA is, it reminds me a lot of my daughter, because when my daughter was young and she went to school and she'd come home from school, I'd always be like, my wife and I would be like, hey, how was school? And it was a general question. And she's like, no, you have to ask me something specific. And it reminds me kind of like when people, when they go in the right there about me's and they're like, I don't know what to say. AMA was a way for you. I loved AMA. I turned it on once for maybe 10 minutes for myself. And I loved it so much because people were asking me such interesting questions. And I started answering them. I remember I was doing it. I think my wife was cooking. I was in the kitchen. My wife was cooking. My daughter was doing her homework. And I was like, I had a big smile on my face. I started answering questions, but I guess because of the position I'm in, people started bashing me for what questions I answered first, even though that's the order they came in, or they don't know me as the type of person who's just like, hey, I want to start with small ones to build momentum because, that's who I am. I'm a momentum person. I love to do something easy and then do it harder. But like, I had to turn it off, but it was like, yeah, I love AMA. I understand why some people get annoyed by it, because it's not for everybody. Some people are not into written words. Some people also were very frustrated with probably status updates when they came in. I know a lot of people disliked private pictures and attacked me for when we allowed pictures to go private and videos to go private a long time ago. So,
well, that's the problem. It's if we try to, because I write a lot of being a therapist, I write a lot on mental health, and I write it about our community because I want to normalize what we feel or normalize the fetishes we're involved in and so on and so forth. But I understand about people-pleasing behavior a lot, which is a question I'm going to come to with you later on. But It is. It's trying to please everybody when you can't please anybody. Because no matter what I like isn't going to be what the next person likes, and so on down the road, and then you catch flack for it. But then you're, like you said, you're pivoting all around. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is still about what's good for the platform and giving it time to settle in. Even if it's a test period, I understand. If the metrics thing ends up bogging down the servers or whatever the case may be into the technical side of it, I understand. If it disappears, I get it.
It's not.
I like it.
It won't disappear for a technical perspective. It'll disappear because we're fine there. It will, and it won't probably fully disappear because I think there is enough people who do appreciate it. But there's questions about should everybody see. The thing that I think comes up a lot is that, hey, I want to be able to see my numbers, but I don't want other people to see my numbers. Or
I'll leave that to you geniuses who are into the computer world, because that just
we have to find the right balance.
I get it. And again, like I understand the psychological arguments by it, but I countered with, there are a lot of communities out there that like having it, because it allows them visibility. They're getting seen, and they at least recognize they're getting seen.
I think one of the things with the view counts, and a lot of people were just shocked how big Fetlife was. And I think a lot of people forget, like I still get emails or PM on-site messages from people asking me what I do full-time for a living. How do I survive? And I'm just like, I manage 45 people.
Right.
Fetlife HQ. Like but it's understandable. We did it on purpose. I come from a Greek family, and Greek family is about making people feel like they're at home, making people feel like you're at home. You try to take something that's large and make it feel small.
Absolutely.
Because that's how I
get that. Yep. Yeah. I'm from a large Spanish family originally. So, and Eastern European. So I understand that. So, which leads me to a really good question. How do you handle knowing that what you've created has played such a massive role in people's most intimate and vulnerable moments of their life, both the good and the bad?
Maybe I'm just mentally slow, but I don't realize it.
It's got a lot of great impacts.
I focus on the negative. I feel like Fetlife has reached 5% of its potential. And
really?
Yeah. I believe that we can do such a better job for society, lots of better job for Kinksters. I always think about like my great grandkids,
right?
How I want Fetlife to exist so all our great grandkids will live in a better world than we lived, or will be able to get access to that information and different perspectives. Because to me, it's not about a right way to do things. It's about perspective. And it reminds me about high school. You just had one perspective. So either you had the cool perspective or the uncool perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to university, there's more perspectives. So
absolutely.
The larger the school, the more likely you are to find your group of people. And
hopefully,
as you go to a larger and larger city, larger university,
yes,
there's a better chance of you finding your people. And my dream is that all of our great grandkids have a place where they can go and see that, they can see the perspective that makes them feel comfortable with who they are sexually.
Right.
Before Fetlife, I had something called Baku Boys. I started Baku Boys, which is a sexual documentary or sexual documentaries, weekly sexual documentaries that I filmed. What I'd do is I'd rent a chalet somewhere, put an ad in the newspaper when newspapers were still relevant, and say, hey, fully paid.
Print media is dead.
Yeah, fully paid weekend. The only thing is that, it's going to be videotaped,
mm-hmm.
And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to show that there's other people just like you. So it wasn't, if people had sex, they had sex and it was filmed, but it wasn't pushed. It wasn't forced. Some weekends nobody had sex. Some weekends they had a lot of sex. But I wanted, the things that I love most is the stories that people told. The 50-year-old who was married and had 3 kids and used to tape a picture from what the Bay or Eaton's. I don't know in the States if you guys those department stores like it would take again when there's print media when you'd get the circulars in the mail and he'd cut out the men in underwears pictures. He'd put it on his bedpost and he'd move it while he was sleeping. He'd move the sheets when he was sleeping with his wife, so he would be so he'd become. I'm looking for the politically correct. So he'd get hard, I guess people say.
Right. He'd be excited.
He'd get excited. Thank you. And then after the age of 50 or whatever, his kids didn't even know he was gay. His ex-wife did not know he's gay, but he was the happiest gay guy I ever met. And it's just like, I always find there's the 0 to 1 problem where you think you're all alone in this world, which is how I felt.
Right.
And I still feel, but you're all by yourself. And then all of a sudden you meet one more person. You see one more person out there like you. And then all of a sudden the clouds start separating and you start seeing just a little bit of light and you could put a smile on your face. That's why I created Fetlife, is because I wanted other people to meet, to increase the chance that people met other people like them so they realized they were not all alone in this world. Because when you feel like you're all alone in this world, holy shoot.
Oh, I know.
It's so fun. It's the worst feeling in the world.
Absolutely. I work with those people every day, trying to find themselves and trying to orient themselves and try to be a better version or navigate how they feel emotionally, and especially in a space like kink where a lot of things can go wrong. But it's still a world where so much can go right. When a lot of the world tells us it's wrong to do, it's why we enjoy it. I mean, here's the irony. My professional job is I'm a therapist. I'm prior military, law enforcement. I've first responder. I'm always the guy that runs towards the fire. My private life, which I don't really share except snippets, but I'm a sadist. I've been a sadist for 26 years. I absolutely love it. I started just in Atlanta. I played and connected with people in the UK, Singapore, Korea, Australia, all over the world. I love it. And the best part has been as I grew, when I started to grow with Fetlife, was that I could stay connected to them and I could watch their journeys from afar and how they evolve and everything they do. And it does make us feel less alone. Sometimes we scream into the void and, I'm not immune to that. Absolutely.
So are you still conflicted? Do you still feel like you're conflicted sometimes?
As far as
your kink life and your vanilla life, as they say, like
no, it doesn't bother me. Even my colleagues that I work with, they know I don't hide it. There's nothing I think if we're going to really normalize conversations about our sexuality and the proclivities that we're into, I don't need to go into details, right. But I'm very open about being a sadist, and why I enjoy it. The mental health community has gone through a lot of problematic issues getting that it was 2013, it was taken out of the DSM about sadism and masochism and how they're disorders. So it's played a lot of pivotal roles prior to that, where people were basically being told there's something wrong with you. And I've always struggled with that whenever I used to hear about it in school. And the interesting part was sitting in classes with professors who were teaching us about human sexuality. And I'm like, yeah, so what about BDSM? And it's like I killed their puppy. It's evil and it's wrong. And I'm like, why? It's a form of expression, from rope to needle play to all the extremes and in between. Actually, there was a wonderful girl that I was following on Fetlife for a long time. She got her PhD and she did her dissertation on rope. And she teaches and works in social. Yeah, I actually have her PhD dissertation. I downloaded it and read it.
Wow.
And kept it. And it's wonderful. And there's more and more people now out there that are really kind of bringing the kink community forward and the lifestyle community forward. And so we can really regrain against what we know between mental health but the problem is that there are still a lot of people, when we look at therapy, for example, BDSM is not therapy. It's therapeutic in some aspects, but it's not therapy. And even if we wanted to try, I mean, at some point, all psychology is experimental.
Mm.
And when we've tried to present, hey, we have a hypothesis, we'd like to try this, they come back and say, well, you can't cross that ethical boundary of touch or doing something with somebody. So I always come back and say, well, you all are sadists anyways, because in extreme cases, you're going to electrocute somebody.
Oh.
And it doesn't really help that I'm being a smart ass when I say it, but I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong.
No.
And so, it's a push and pull. There is actually a lot more studies going on around the world about how healthy BDSM is, from Italy to Belgium to the US to Canada. There's a couple big professors in your neck of the woods I'm trying to wrangle in for a discussion, especially if you know who Gad Sad is, or have ever heard of him.
Cool name.
Yeah, he's a evolutionary psychologist and commercial psychologist. I think he teaches at Toronto.
Okay.
With a even more famous person, Jordan Peterson. Peterson's not there anymore. But they've all talked on sexuality. And so I've whenever they do, I start sending messages like with you. You send it, and maybe one day they'll read it. But I tell them like how much I'd love to talk to them about it. But we have to normalize all of these conversations, because otherwise we have all these stigmas against us that we're somehow wrong. And especially the other problem too coming in is that there's not yet a country in the world that I've found that you can't legalize what they view as abuse, even if we consent. You can't consent to it. So it's such a very odd area we all kind of inhabit, and how we all do it and how these spaces exist. But I mean, again, that's really the enjoyment of it, because we come together. I love the rope community. I give them a lot of shit. I don't. I'm a sadist. I don't have time for 28 hours of rope. I love what they do. But, it's about beating people. But we enjoy it. And I'll still watch. Or I'll watch somebody do a needle show or an electrocution or some of the more edgier pieces of play. But it gives them that form of expression. And then, obviously they'll go and then they talk about their weekends on Fat. And then they get they'll get their local community and then the global community reaction. But I'm curious for you, was there ever a moment when you started Fetlife, or even recently, where you're like, man, is this even worth it?
Yes. Yeah. Not recently. One would think that it was more recently than when I was younger, but I started Fetlife because I needed Fetlife, and it was kind of like the sum of all the things I started before. I'm kind of more like an inventor than anything. I need something. I try something. It doesn't work. I move on to the next thing, or I iterate over it. And Fetlife was kind of like all my different ideas beforehand, and kind of like, I'm going to take the idea from here. I would take the good stuff from this. Holy shit. I think I finally figured out what I was trying to do. So,
right.
So within like 2.5 months, I shipped Fetlife. I worked on it part-time while having 2 other jobs. Then I started working on it full-time, because this was 2009, kind of like when the recession happened. I lost my job.
Yep, like a lot of us.
Half the agency I was working for was let go. I was one of the ones that were let go. Everybody was crying. I was cheering because I'm like, yes, I can work with Fetlife full time. I felt bad right away as I noticed everybody was crying. I put my hands back down, stopped celebrating. I'm like, sorry. Like I said, I could be awkward. Then I did it full time I can't tell you how many months, but I did it full time for a bit. It was measured in months. And an old buddy called me up, said, hey, there's a new startup. We need somebody to do user experience design, part time. You open to it? And something was bothering me, so I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll do some UX design consulting on the side. I did that for a couple months, and I wasn't really touching Fetlife much. And I started getting this question in my mind of like, what are my kids going to think about it? Will my kids not love me? Will I not find a wife? Because the only thing I ever wanted to do in life was be a father. I wanted to have 8 kids. And that's all I wanted to do, is be a father.
Right.
And
I'm assuming they both know.
My wife and daughter, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have 8 kids. I had 1. She's a handful, so maybe she's like 8. But of course, so I didn't. So I was started questioning things. Even kink.com contacted me, but they want to purchase Fetlife. But my boss at the time, who was very successful, pulled me aside and was like, "You know what? Let's go out for coffee." I don't know why he did, but it was just like a day or two before I was going to shut down the site. And he's like, "Hey, you know what? Let's go for coffee." And he was a 50-something-year-old man, but a really nice guy. And we went for coffee, and I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he's like, "Something's bothering you. What's bothering you?" And I'm like, "So I run this site called Fetlife." And he's like, "Well, how's it doing?" He's a businessman, so I started talking about the numbers. He's like, "Man, those are great numbers. Like, people are using it, and people need it. Like, this is great. Why are you down? You built something that people want." And I'm like, "Man, I don't know if I'll ever find somebody who loves me, and if my kids will love me, or they'll hate me for what I'm doing." And he just starts laughing, and he sits back. He's like,
"Is your daughter barred from the site?"
My daughter's 20 now, so she's not barred.
Yeah, but that would be a really awkward dinner conversation.
You'll have to understand me more and my family more to know if it's an awkward dinner conversation. I'll get to that in a second.
Sure.
So he's like, "Do you know who my father was?" I said, "No, I don't know who your father was." He's like, "Have you ever heard of the RU something pill?" I'm like, "What's that?"
RU 486.
I think we're talking about the same thing. He's like, "Is the day after pill?"
Yeah, that's RU 486. That was the testing number for it before it became the morning after pill.
Yeah, I'm like, "Yeah, I know about it." He's like, "My father invented it." I said, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, my dad was the inventor." He's like, "My dad was banned in 7 countries. He couldn't go into 7 countries. He was wanted. His father was the CEO of the company. I don't know if he was the inventor, co-inventor, or the CEO. I think he was more the CEO of the pharmaceutical company that invented it." He's like, "My father is not allowed, barred from 7 countries." Listen, this 15 years ago. I might be off. It might be 8, might be 6.
Sure.
And I was like, and he had to have a bodyguard full time.
Wow.
I said, "Oh." I'm like, "Did you love your father?" He's like, "I love my father." I didn't care. He sat me aside and he explained to me why he's doing it. And I loved him even more once he explained to me why it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And within, I listened to him. Within 2 hours, I had my letter of resignation. And he's like, "Why are you quitting?" I said, because thank you. Like you put me back on my path. That's what I needed to hear. Now I can go after it. And I've been focusing on Fetlife full time ever since.
That's a big thing. Okay. So do you ever struggle with the persona of John Baku versus the person who is John in real life?
When my daughter was like 10 or 12 years old, she heard of a John Baku, like she heard people call me it or whatever. Like she heard the name, but we sat her down. I was like, "Sweetie, you can't use that name. Like you gotta like."
Right.
When we're in public, you can't use that name. But she didn't know what it was. But when kids, they know they're not supposed to, they know something's up.
Yep.
Maybe she was 10 or 9 years old. I think she was more like 9 years old. And this was when she first understood that like there's this another name for me, but you shouldn't be using it. And we'd be in public at like some supper or whatever, and she'd just start yelling the name out loud. I'm like, "Stop!" And so we had to. She did it once or twice. We had to sit down and explain to her, "You can't do that." That's. But my wife and my daughter call me a prude. Like that's their name for me.
Interesting enough. Do you? And I mean, you don't have to go into any details. Like I told you, I don't care if people know I'm a Satan. It's an interesting dichotomy I have because it gives me a lot of insight into some of the people that I work with that are because primarily I work with veterans around the world. That's 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day. That's my gig, and I love it. That's what I live for because I'm a vet myself. But then, I work with others, and sometimes those people are within somewhere in the global community. So it gives me an interesting perspective. But, and you don't have to share this at all. Are you involved in any? Do you have your own kink? And Fetlife's not a kink, by the way, so don't don't tell me that one.
I have huge issues with my sexuality.
Okay.
Huge. Which I feel very bad for my wife for, because she's very open sexually. She was one of the craziest person on bondage.com back in the day.
Oh God, yeah, I remember that place.
B.com days, so I have a lot of fetishes, but I don't practice them because I don't feel comfortable with who I am sexually.
That's a different discussion for a different day. We'll schedule a session.
I'm not to say that I never, but it takes a lot for me to feel comfortable.
Sure.
Just to be clear, this looks like I'm drinking beer during an interview, but it's a kombucha. Okay.
Nah, that's all right.
I'm just showing. It
doesn't matter. I've got a sip. Look, I've got a gigantic thing in here. It could be full of vodka for all you know. So
that's a true story.
Yeah. Because again. I'm not, and for the record, I don't work for you, but a lot of times when I see people attacking somebody else for regardless of the reason, again, like I said to you, that whole first responder thing in front of me, I get highly defensive because I'm like, this is the stupidest. I see the dumb arguments, and I know that they've got to have some sort of weight. And when you look at that type of stuff, has your platform shaped your views on people or relationships or even your own desires?
First of all, and please don't take this as I'm correcting you or whatever.
Sure.
I do believe everybody's opinion is valid, and I do believe everybody's perfect. So when somebody is saying that, let's use view counts, that it's the stupidest thing ever, it needs to be removed, to me, it's like, okay, they might not be explaining why they hate it, but it's making them feel in such a way that makes them act in a certain way. And it upsets me because it's like, fuck, I did something to them that hurt them. And I need to kind of try to figure out with them
but
why.
You can't save everybody. Sorry, I'm going to throw some therapy in there, but you can't save everybody.
Fuck that shit.
But you can't.
Sorry, am I allowed swearing?
No, you can. I don't give a shit. I cuss during therapy because it's healthy. We have to be able to. I'm a Navy. I was in the Navy. I've been to Thailand.
Just because you can't save everybody doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
No, absolutely, but that comes at a cost and a toll upon yourself.
Who the hell cares? I don't care.
Yeah, but your family does. You can't internalize, oh God, this is going to turn into therapy. It's going to turn into a therapy session.
But it doesn't mean you're right? So yes, it comes at a cost. They know my daughter knows who her father is, and she loves me to shit. She's my best friend.
Sure.
She's.
But you can't sacrifice your family for people you don't know.
It's a cost. It's a cost.
I understand. And that's kind of the point of this today, because that's why I'm not doing the whole origin and why and where in the developmental. Not that I don't care and not that that's not important, but that's been done to death because it's more important to kind of talk about these things, because I think this is actually humanizes you into people understanding how much you are trying to give in order to give them a better experience. But what I understand and the reality of that is you cannot. That's people-pleasing behavior. And while that I get that you want to live there, it's an impossibility to achieve because there's going to be a cost somewhere.
Yeah.
Because every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else.
Yes, and I'll probably die 10 to 15 to 20 years younger than what I should. But it's a cost. It's a
sure.
If I can live a life where I optimize for living a long life, where I'm perfect in all those senses, but I will watch the Dodo. I don't know if you know the Dodo, which is it's a YouTube channel where they show like the rescue dogs and stuff.
Oh yeah.
At night, that's how I relax. I watch it and I cry. I cry almost every single effing night when I watch these things. It's
it's emotional release. We all need it. It doesn't happen. It happens to me. I watch that American Idol, like the all the people auditioning, and I saw one. This was months, like last year sometime. I watched a father and his 10-year-old boy singing together. no reason, out of nowhere, I like the waterworks turned on, and it was just this big emotional dump that I had. It does happen to all of us,
But
you know.
it's you see those people and you see what type of impact they make on the world, and I want to make that impact too. I
But
want
you've
to,
made that impact.
but I can do more. How do you live with
Absolutely. I'm not
yourself?
saying that that's fine.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful drive, but you don't shortchange yourself. Fuck, this sounds like therapy. Don't shortchange yourself that you haven't done
My
it.
assistant told me this was a therapy session, is it not? uh,
Well, I
I,
mean, that's what happens. You sit down with the therapist. That's the thing. Because I find it funny because you're telling me the same things that I hear from clients on occasion, and then this is where I start fighting back because I'm like,
but,
that's great that
but
you want to do this, but
why do you want to take that away from somebody?
I'm not taking it away from you.
But maybe you are.
I'm not. You can't people please. It's an unhealthy behavioral pattern.
But
It comes at a cost. That's why I said every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, argue that one. I'm good. I've got science behind me.
But sometimes you're saying no to TV and yes to saving a life.
Sure.
Or no to reading an extra page of the book.
I worked in the military. I've worked in law enforcement. I try to save as many, but I can't save everybody. And I can't carry the weight of the dead with me.
No, you can't. Why not? Why not?
Because I can't. Empathy only extends so far. I got this question actually, ironically, once. It was on the platform, and I had made some comment, and then somebody accused me because I'm a therapist, I should be empathetic to the entire world. That's a complete impossibility, because if I did that, I would go into bouts of depression, high anxiety, and more than likely end up in some sort of ideation where I'd no longer be alive. We cannot have empathy for the world. It's an impossibility.
But everybody should go to the max that they can. Some people
absolutely
have zero.
That I agree with 100%. 100%. I think we should kindness and empathy and support, and at least approaching things with an open ear. I agree. Those things are fine, but at the end of the day, I know I can't. I will always try. I'm more open to my clients than a lot of other therapists are. It's not a dig at them. I just do my practice differently.
Mm-hmm.
My support doesn't stop just because my session ends. They can email, contact me. They get a hold of me on all different parts of social media. But I have boundaries. 6:00 at night, I'm done working. That's it. And then I'll get back to it the next day, because otherwise I can't recharge myself.
Yeah, it's I think that's a struggle with getting older also.
Sure, I'm 50, I get it.
When I'm 40,
where I want to move in Europe and go and retire, and well, not retire, but quieter life.
So I'm 47. When I was 35, I could take way more than I can take now.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I used to be able to stay up to 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, wake up back at 8 a.m. and take it again. Now it's like, one of my right-hand man, our foreman, he's staying with me right now. And, he sees me on the couch at 7 p.m., just like zonked. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm like, man, I need to recharge. So I get it. I get the recharge part. But I'd never. Everybody's
we have a lot more energy when we're younger, and we're a lot more ambitious and idealistic. Our ideologies change as we get older. It's not because I'm not saying you can't care at all. That's not what I'm telling you. But I am telling you that's limited. Why? Because, well, hundreds of thousands of people before you tried it, and I know where they end up. And I'm not telling you to change your ways. That's also not what I'm doing. I'm just saying I get the drive behind it, but I also know that at the end of the day, people pleasing doesn't work.
Can two people be right at the same time?
Sometimes. And I'm not here to. I appreciate everything you do, whether everything that you've installed, every little some of them I don't know. I know we all have the Fetlife announcement thing, and on occasion I go and read it because I've 9 times out of 10 I've written something and I'm trying to, like you, I don't have that big of a global audience, but every person who comments on my posts, I respond. I want them to know that they feel heard. So I understand you. Now, and that's after I work with all of my veterans, after I work with all of my clients, set up my stuff for the show, write something for all the social medias I'm on. I respond to everybody because I want them to know I care. but if it goes beyond something that I can do, then I have to also be cognizant of myself so I don't end up feeling like I did a few days ago, where I was so completely drained at 5 o'clock in the evening that I sat down in my chair and passed out. And
That's
I was just
crazy.
done and cooked. So I totally I get that. And you're right, as we get older, it gets more difficult. Our energy and our focus change. But and that's interesting because you talked about that I know that website that YouTube channel you're talking about, and I was actually going to ask about what do you do when things get overwhelming? But I mean, it's a great release because you get to cry or laugh, and animals are so wonderful because that's pure empathy. That's just love that they have, and so it's always amazing to watch how those stories. I know I've seen it a few times. Um, so what keeps you so motivated then when things get difficult?
Um, I guess solving problems motivates me. I don't.
The analytical engineering side.
It's I'm not like motivation is a weird word for me. Like I was meant to do this. You know, I don't know how long I was meant to do this for. I don't know if tomorrow I'm meant to fail, but I must have been meant to do this for at least this long. And it would be so maybe the simpler way of answering this is that one of my favorite books ever is it's Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, but the second one is Living and Dying in Peace by Dalai Lama. And everything has to do with how I will feel on my deathbed. I don't want death to be painful.
Sure.
And I want to be able to, every time I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do this, I'm too tired or whatever. I always ask myself, well, will I regret it on my deathbed? Will I regret not?
It's an interesting way to look at things.
Yeah, like I'm strong to no regrets. So it's like shit. Like if I could do something to help this person, and if I don't, I'll regret it and I'll have to live with it. And it has a lot. Only a couple people have ever heard this story, but it has a lot to do with when I was 12 years old. When I was 12 years old, we were very close. We lived in like a cul-de-sac, so like a, does it make in English? Do you guys call it cul-de-sac?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do. We had one around the corner.
Yeah.
So a street just goes a nice little round circle at the end, a whole bunch of houses around it.
Yeah, we were five kids, and I was the youngest, and Michael was the oldest. He was like 18, I was 12, and he came just before going out to like a dance. I think he was 18, maybe 17. He came to me. He's like, "Hey, let's play a game of 21," because my dad built a basketball net outside the house. So we played 21, and the whole time I was playing, I was saying to myself, and maybe you'll laugh because this is Canada, I knew he carried a gun on him. And the whole time I was saying, tell him not to bring the gun with him to the party, over and over again. And I had this gut feeling. Never felt this way. But I kept on saying to myself, but I'm like, he's 18, I'm 12.
Right.
Who the hell am I to say this? All I remember is the next morning, his mother screaming because he was dead. Because he pulled out a gun to try to save somebody else and he got shot with a shotgun.
Wow.
So I don't ever want to forget that.
Sure.
Because I could say, well, I couldn't have done anything. Well, I could have. Does it mean he would listen to me? Possibly not. But he possibly would have.
Mm-hmm.
Or it would have made him 1 second later. Or we would have gotten a tiff and he would have been 5 minutes later and he wouldn't have been in that spot at that second and it would have saved him.
Or it was just his time. You have to be able to accept that.
I could accept that, but if I could change time, I'm going to change it.
Sure. But the problem is that when we look at these things in our lives, we try to understand, my God, this sounds like a therapy session. But the reality is, and I do understand that because I've lost friends and we all wish we could say or interject. Will they listen? Sometimes the words of a child are much more powerful than the words of an adult. Why? Because they come from a place of truth and love. There is no
Sure.
filter with children, and there's no agenda behind it. But that's not a mistake. That's yours. I understand why you're carrying it.
He made the choice himself. He was trying to save somebody. I get it. Or he was trying to help somebody. I get it. And maybe that was honorable. And I never thought about that until now. I always just thought about, shit, I could have saved him. I could have opened my mouth. So when I say certain things that people are like, what the hell are you saying that for? You should have kept that to yourself. It's because of this.
And I understand that. If he did, in fact, and that was whatever the reasons were, ultimately that choice was his. However it boiled down, if he ran into the fire to save somebody, every time I go out and do something, because I have a partner, if I do something, there was a car accident here where I live, not too far, like about a year and a half ago. I heard it and it rumbled and flipped. I mean, you could hear all the grinding.
Ish.
So I ran out, and my partner wasn't concerned about me wanting to help. She was more concerned because she didn't want me to get hurt. It didn't stop me, everybody turned out to be okay and drunk driving, but I think about all these things, and especially as I start to get older, now we're getting to the point in a society you can't really even help, because if you do, you're either ostracized, criminalized for it, or you get attacked yourself. So I have to take a look. As much as I love saving, like you, trying to save the world, I also realize I can only help those that want to help themselves. And even then, for me, it's still a struggle. I get people who don't show up. For you, you're carrying the weight of a platform. But at the end of the day, you cannot answer, because I can't imagine a world where, hey, I want a button to remove AMA, allow my views to be locked in, but only for a time period. So put a timer in there to do all of that and be that functionality and to carry all that weight and then go, it's feasible. At some point, a little bit of selfishness is okay. Look, I understand that's it's not, I'm making it quite reductionist.
Everybody has to, at one point, your body is just like, okay, I gotta go to bed. So
yes.
So because I'm sleeping from this time to this time, I'm not around for people. Yes. But you want to at least feel like you've tried your best. And I don't want to make this about me. I'm very fortunate the way that we bring people onto the team, where we hire people mainly for their heart and for their core values. And then from there we can build them, we can train them up. And we're very fortunate that everybody deeply cares on the platform that works with us. Now, their version of caring might be to do AB, and for me it's CD, and then we have to work together to figure out, why do you think caring is AB and I think it's CD, and sometimes it's life experience, sometimes it's not us both trying, not truly deeply understanding the root of the problem that people, or the root of the pain, because as people, we're not always humans, we're not very always good at telling you really what is that bothering us, what is the root of the problem that's bothering us.
Sure.
But then we work together, and often it's E and F that's the solution. But like, it's not just me, it's everybody in the team deeply cares, because even sometimes when I slip and I'm exhausted and I'm just like sitting there, I got R4 Mon, or I'm not going to say everybody's name, but
no, that's fine. Christ, they can go look for themselves if they're that curious.
It's because I know their first names, and not everybody's comfortable with me using it.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not even worried about all that. But this brings up a really good point for me. Do you ever think about the future of Fetlife without you?
The team does. It's always like, where's your will, John?
We will remake it without him.
No, not like that. It's more they just want to make sure, because they love what they're doing. They want to make sure that if anything happens to me, that it doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. So it's not a bad.
So what's the future of Fetlife without you?
I hope,
because there's going to have to come a day that's going to happen.
Yes, I'm hoping that if we get to that point, that's a really good problem to have.
Right.
But I've had people who worked with me for a very long time who understand you can't just join the team and understand all the intricacies of like our core values or why we make decisions or how we make decisions. But I've had people with me who worked very closely with me for a long time that I trust that if I do disappear tomorrow because I have a heart attack, that they will be able to continue on Fetlife. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to do it exactly like me, because everybody has their small little things. But even now, I don't make all the decisions anymore. There's a lot of people. I'm a big proponent of don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And people will come to me. They're like, okay, should I do this, this, and this? I'm like, is it coming from a good place? Are you doing the right thing? If you believe you're doing the right thing and you're not lazy in your thought process, don't ask. Do, and then ask for permission. So I definitely, every day I'm less and less involved in all the minutiae of the details.
Do you think you can ever truly live Fetlife, or is it always going to be a part of you?
I always dream of the day where I always have this image where I come into this office, but I'm a little bit later than everybody else. I'm not the first one in. It's like 10 o'clock. I walk in and I see a bunch of people with huge smiles on their faces running around. And I even see my daughter there or like that she comes to visit me. But I see them running around saying good morning, running by me, and then being okay and loving every second of it, because I feel like a lot of happiness goes to people when they feel like they've accomplished something, where they have power over what they're responsible for and make decisions, see what results from their decisions, iterate over those decisions, struggle. And I believe they become better partners, better parents, because they're more fulfilled. So I look forward to that day where I just go to an office and I see that and I smile. Then my daughter comes to visit me with my grandchildren, and then we go for lunch. And then at the end of the day, I go home and I sit on the couch next to my wife and we read books,
Right.
And that's my dream life, in the future, but I'm far from that now.
What do you hope that, maybe in the future, someday when you get a chance to retire and go off back to Greek life in the Mediterranean and sit with the family, what do you want people to say about you and your impact years from now? And will that even resonate with you?
I don't care what they say about me. But at the end of the day,
yeah, but if you don't care, then why do you fight so hard to make sure that they're okay? That duality can't exist.
So I have that huge issue in my thing. I want to make people happy, but just slightly above that, I want to do the right thing. When my father put me to bed every single night as a kid, he only said one thing to me: is always be a leader, never a follower. And then sometimes he'd always say, do the right thing. He wouldn't piss off my mother all the time, because she'd be like, okay, you gotta punish him for his homework, or you gotta punish him for not getting good grades. And my dad would just turn around to me. He's like, did you try your hardest? Yep. Perfect. I'm not going to punish him. He tried his hardest. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to be known. I guess if people see it or not, I want people to know that I always try to do the right thing no matter what. Now, there's probably a lot of people listening to right now saying, fuck that shit. Like, this guy never does the right thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a long time to do the right thing. Just because you think you know the answer to something, or just because something's top priority for you, doesn't mean it's top priority for everybody else.
Absolutely.
It's at the end of the day, I want to have known that I ended up doing all the right things. But it's not so simple. It is really not so simple. And sometimes, and the nuance is very important, because sometimes when doing the right thing to some people causes a lot of other problems. That's not the right thing for those things. So it's a bunch of weighing of a bunch of different It's like like hi-fi stereos back in the day when you had
Yep.
like
Mm-hmm.
equalizers,
Mm-hmm.
and you're always trying to find the right thing with the perfect sound. That's what it is. You're always playing with those levers to try to find the right thing. Can we do more? 100%. Am I happy with Fetlife? I said 5%. It needs to get much better. But what I am proud of is that every year we've gotten much better. And I'm more proud of what the team has accomplished. Without the team, there would be no Fetlife.
This one is going to be more because I've seen it a lot. Although I know there was a problem with the big user last year who I just kind of railroaded this past week on my show. Plagiarism, copyright.
Okay.
I know there are big users steal work and they put it up as their own. I know it gets shit. There's a guy I know now that does it. It's all he does. How is there any plans in the future? Out of all the questions I got to ask you, frankly, I discarded them because plagiarism is like I write everything I write's original. If I'm not, I'm quoting it, and I do it in my APA psychology style. But other than that, it's when people blatantly take things. Sometimes I know. Look, I realize the amount of reports frankly, your army is not big enough to, I'm sure, handle the amount of reports you guys get daily.
It's bare. It's you're right. It's not.
It's not.
We get.
I'm not. But I'm not here to argue. That's not. You're doing. I still praise all of you for what you do because I imagine not wanting to do that. I once talked to a person who worked for Facebook who their entire job was to go through and remove illegal content, and I mean any type of illegal content they ever came across, and they quit after 3 hours because it couldn't do it.
3 hours seems like a long time. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
From what I understand, for the stuff that people upload to Facebook, we're very lucky to not have that problem.
Yeah. No. I mean, and I know, and I hear the same things, but out of a lot of the questions I got asked to ask you, one for me that really sticks out is plagiarism.
Okay, so plagiarism. What do you mean? Do you mean like
plagiarism? So let's just say I have my own private website as well.
Okay.
If I write something there, that's my content. I own it. I've written it. That's my intellectual property. Yep. If someone goes to my website, cuts and pastes that, and then puts it on place, let's just say Fetlife, they put it there, and then they claim it's their own. That's plagiarism. They stole it.
Yes. So
I know it's a tricky subject.
I don't know if it's a tricky subject. We just got to break it down into its different parts. Let's start with pictures because I find that one's an easier one.
Sure.
So initially with pictures, people had to report a picture and basically say, this is where it was found, and then we would take it down, so we could be able to find it. Initially, way back when, we used to contact who we thought was the owner and say, hey, did you give this person permission to have that picture, or do you mind it being up?
Right.
And we used to have to keep a database of like who was okay with their pictures. That did not scale, but I love doing things.
No, I can't even imagine that would work.
I love doing things that don't scale.
Right.
Then it evolved to, hey, if we have a good feeling that it's not theirs, we take it down. And now, because of technology, we've gotten to the point where we reverse image search every single image, and we see if it's found somewhere else on the internet. That's uploaded.
Sure.
And when we see it's found, okay, it's this, it's from this website, and we're like, yeah, they're not the same person. This is not their picture.
Sure.
You check the about me. They're not a photographer. They're just, we'll take that down right away and nobody has to even report it now. So we're very proactive when it comes to pictures and videos. With writings, from what I understand, and of course, my search has not been exhaustive, there's no real technology that can say that out there that says, hey, this is stolen from this website. You know what? I should not speak because I probably haven't put any effort into that.
That's okay. Because I'll give you a perfect example. So there was a user there that I connected with about a year and a half ago because he was big into men's mental health, which was outstanding for me.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he's a star sign. I'll just leave it at that. However,
did we lock him out maybe about 6 months ago?
I don't know if he is. I probably can do a quick search. Let me just see real quick if he's there.
Because
Here's the reality, though. No, I don't think he was, but unfortunately, what had happened was I had problems inside of his group, which, notwithstanding, I'm glad what he does, but I cannot be what the advice they were giving. I'll leave it at that. So I left. We still kept in touch. I actually interviewed him, put him on the show. It was really great. Glad he loved putting all this stuff forward. Then I started noticing inconsistencies in what he was writing, because stuff he was saying didn't match with what I knew. So then one day I found a quote he'd took. It was said by a therapist. And I said, well, you need to either ask her for permission or at the very least put up her name that's who said it. You can't you're claiming you wrote this. You didn't write this. So then I started finding the same user, which I've reported, and quite a few of his posts have come down, but he was taking things that were written Facebook or other places on social media, period, putting them up and then claiming he's writing them. And I'm like, you're not. I've actually even emailed him a while ago, and I'm like, you need to stop, because if you don't, I'm going to keep reporting you, and I'm the one who's doing it. I don't care that you know, but stop doing it, because these are therapists or these are other mental health professionals you're stealing from. You're not writing this. You're not doing this work.
So when it comes to written word, and I know I've personally seen reports where people are like, hey, this is plagiarism. And then we brought it to the head of legal and we're like, hey, they're not like one-for-one copies. Is this plagiarism? And our head of legal would look through it and says, no, this was modified enough, or I don't know exactly what words they used. And again,
your
case that you're referring to might not be my case at all, right? So
sure.
So and be like, yeah, this is might be douchey, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I realize how plagiarism works. That if you've changed enough and you're not using some direct quotes, but I mean, I've even seen now people in their dissertations for their doctoral thesis, if they take one line that they've taken from somewhere else and do not quote it, their dissertation is then destroyed. It's not allowed. Their entire doctorate will get re-reviewed, because I realize we're not at this level here, and that's not what I'm saying. There was the big guy down from Australia. I'll leave it at that. That got nailed last year. Yes. A lot of his work was all from prolific writers that he was taking and stealing. He actually stole content from me to the point that he blocked me out, didn't know, and he kept doing it. Look, I don't have control over that. None of us have control over. I just know that hopefully if we report it, at least I know sometimes it gets taken down, and sometimes, because I'll put in the links. I do the whole, where was it taken from, who wrote it, here you go, here you go, here you go. But I see these people and it's like, God damn, will you just stop doing that shit? Like, you didn't write it. You make the quote, tell everybody you did it and how it moves you. You're fine, and I'll live with it. But the moment you claim you wrote it and I knew you didn't, I'm pissed. Like, it's angering, because some of them, a couple of times people have done it. They've done it to people I know. And then I'll tell them, and I'm like, they'll tell me, can you get it taken down? And I'm like, because they don't want to be associated. That's not what their practice is. They don't deal with anything. Unlike the world believes, not every therapist is trained to deal with. There are no classes for us to train with BDSM. It's specialized, or you have to have exterior knowledge of it.
Right.
So they're not comfortable talking about it. They, let alone, don't want to be associated with it. Nothing there's wrong with it. There's just, that's not in their wheelhouse, but they don't want their stuff used there. So, there's always a lot of permissions that sit around that. And I know intellectual property, when it comes to that and the written word, gets really tricky.
Yeah.
But
so when it comes to copyright, for sure, 100% remove it. If we don't, that's a big mistake. That somebody made a mistake in the case, and somebody should email appeals@fetlife.com or caretakers@fetlife.com, and senior coordinator will look at it. When it comes to this, and you know this stuff way better than me, right? I'm dyslexic. I try not to write. When it comes,
I'm not laughing at those of you. Please don't email me, because I'm laughing. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing at his comment. Calm down, because I know it. You'd be surprised. I'll say one thing or I'll giggle. Why did you laugh? You hate our community. No, I don't. It's just, it was funny. We got to laugh at certain shit sometimes.
Sometimes we laugh because we're uncomfortable. Sometimes we laugh because we're coping. We're not perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, it's when it comes. I'm just going to start laughing. when it comes to this, I'm going to call it gray area because that's what it is to me with my limited knowledge of like somebody is, taking different pieces from different people's writing or modifying enough where it falls into the fair use. You're 100% right. We do not take any action against those. Should we? I don't have an opinion on the subject.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, because I do my content that I create. I'm not after for me, it's not about the followers. I can care less about. It's for me, the people I can help. But because I write, and that's the sphere I live in, it does, like, writers get protective, and then they fight for what, But I look, I get it, and that's a really big. You know what? If you care about me, John, you're going to do something about it because that affects me.
So
I can flip that around on you, and I could do that all day.
But I was going to continue. It wasn't over. I do care. It's always best when we have black and white rules because then there's more consistency in the way we act on it.
Sure.
Somebody forgetting a quote is very different than somebody taking and heavily borrowing something.
Sure.
If there was, next time you come across one of these things,
sure,
please forward me the information and let's have a conversation about it. Because I'm much better looking at something and being like, oh, I see why this bothers you.
Sure. Absolutely. You know what? I'll spell it all out why it sits in that range and where it no longer goes from, hey, I'm just borrowing. Because a lot of it we're really talking about, it comes down to the idea. We're borrowing the idea, which is fine. A lot of writing is always borrowed
art
generates a question and then we borrow a part and then we expand on that part. I'm not the first person on this planet to talk about trauma. I'm not. I'm inspired by so many others and their work and what they do. So then I write from my own experiences or the people I interact with. But I'm not writing anything that's grand. I'm not reinventing what it is. I'm just making it so it's easy to understand. But if I do, when I write stuff about, I did something on neuroticism the other day or an attachment style, I put stuff in from actual, the researchers and where their work, because they need to be represented. And not only is it going to sit on FET, it's going to sit on my private website because I want to give them the credit for the work they've done because I didn't do it. But I appreciate their studies and I appreciate all the effort that they put in and probably the years of their lives that they spent doing it.
One thing people don't seem to, one thing I want people to get is that there's a difference between what we believe is right and what we believe we should act on.
Sure.
What you said there about quoting and I think that's the right thing to do. 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then there's the question of, what we'll act on, because being shitty is not illegal.
No. Unfortunately.
And it's also not black and white either, right?
No, it's not. Because what's shitty to one person is not shitty to another.
Right. And maybe there's good reasons they did that and we don't know it, so it's not so, there's a lot of things that I might even fight for on Fetlife. And people will think that, oh, I must believe in what they believe. No, I don't. If you knew what I truly believed, you'd be shocked. But it's my responsibility to fight for people's rights to practice, to practice consensual kinks. Right?
I kind of know the argument. If we're talking about the one that went down last year where everybody was up in arms, I agree.
I can't police what we're talking about, but yeah, maybe who knows? But
the bigger one that pretty much ignited Fetlife for a month and a half, and everybody's like, a certain type of play should. Man, my whole argument is you cannot dictate to the world what other people they are attracted to and what they can do. We're literally in a sphere.
I was on vacation.
Were you?
I was on a family vacation, and but that's fine. It's one of those where my family didn't see me for 3 days. I was hiding. We rented an Airbnb. I hid in the basement for 3 days, trying to figure out what was right. And then the person who I usually handle a lot of these things with, they went to the hospital with issues, it's just like one thing led to one thing after another. Right. It was like shit. And we have a couple people of color on the team.
Sure.
And two of them are senior caretaker coordinators. And I sat with them and I said, hey, what should we do? I'd love to know what you do.
First thing is stop saying people of color. They're just people.
Yes.
That would be my advice. Yeah.
Uh,
Because see that to me, that's quite reductionist.
yeah,
I don't know why. As a matter of fact, it harkens back into a time of about the 1960s when we used to say, well, that's a colored area. Well, I don't. That's why I listen to much more intelligent people than myself because it makes a lot of sense. That's not an identity. Not that I'm not harping on you. I think
yeah.
it's more of a. It's just a talk. They're just people, and if they're great at their job and they awesome,
But they have their life experiences, right?
sure,
And
absolutely,
I asked them, what we should do, and one of them specifically said, "Hey, let me speak to my friends, and I'll get back to you. I'd love to get more people's opinions. I'm going to a munch that night, or I was going to an event. I'd like to
sure.
get more opinions." And the next day, they're like, "Yeah, we definitely should remove this from Fetlife." I said, "Okay, let's go through it together. You tell me. We're going to go through a bunch of content. You say remove, keep, and based on that, we'll come up with a guideline." And an hour and a half into it, she turned around to me, or I turned around to her. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels we're punishing black people more than white people."
Absolutely.
And
There's a good friend of mine who's in the Netherlands. He's a bull. And look, I'm an American and I live abroad. I don't live in the States.
oh, you don't live in the
I've been
States?
out,
Okay.
no. I live abroad. I love my country. I fought for my country, but, I also consult on the side. So I live in a region where I consult. And it makes it a lot easier for me, but I have friends all over. And the one thing, like, especially my friends in the UK or the Netherlands, they're like, why is it that a lot of Americans push their values? I'm like,
Mm,
oh, I don't know. Personally, it's some sort of weird internalized hate, and it's guilt and everything else. And I said, my problem with what they do is that they want to push that agenda on everybody else. To me, when I look at integration for equality, I look to the UK. They're the most advanced
yeah.
people as far as dating, and they don't. It's not about race. It is about a connection. That's it.
Interesting.
They don't see anything else, and I absolutely 100% love that. When that argument took place last year or whatever, that discussion, however you want to frame it, my friend who's this bull, he told me, I will only get involved if race play is a thing. I love it, but I'm being told now I can't do it. And I'm being told, he's like, the worst part, I was being told by white people, it's some weird form. And I'm like, please don't listen. Don't get me wrong. I love Americans, but for the most part, they carry a lot of hubris. Like they know everything. They don't.
But both sides are right. I'm sorry to say this.
Look, there is a point, but then that comes down to the individual.
Right, exactly. It's I can have an opinion, you could have an opinion,
Absolutely.
and we can discuss it, but we shouldn't hate the other person for not agreeing with us.
Well, yeah,
Or,
that's where
or,
it gets
or
that's where it
expect,
gets murky.
or expect the other person to 100% agree with us. So the people
Sure.
who think that race play is for racism no matter what, and then
They're going to have a hard time leaving that sphere of
and
where
then,
they are in the world.
but even if somebody of color is into it, it's still wrong. They just don't know it. And I'm simplifying
but
it. I'm butchering.
no. You're absolutely that you're actually hitting the nail on the head. And I have a huge problem with that because you can't dictate to a woman who's from India that is only attracted to Argentinian guys because he's Argentinian
Very
and wants
precise.
to peg him in his ass. You can't do that. You can't tell her that's wrong.
There must be a story there why you chose Indian and
There is.
Argentinian.
There's
Okay,
a lot of I do, but that is a very valid point. We're telling people, and then they'll say what they get really. The real reductionist part of that story is that it's not about her and him. It only comes down to black and white, and I'm like, well, why? That's you do, and I'll tell them you do realize there's other races in the world, right? Like you realize other races, cultures, religions, they all exist. It's like I'm talking to a wall. There are certain conversations I just choose not to get involved with, but I mean, I have a lot of friends and they'll ask me to pick a side, and I'm like, well, I chose my side. If it's your kink, is it consensual? Did you agree? Yeah. Is it hurting anyone? No. Are you getting hurt? No. Are they getting hurt? No. Have fun.
Yep.
Your kink, not my kink, but your kink's okay.
But
I don't agree with a lot of the kinks that people have. I don't do needle play. I don't do rope. I hate rope. Nothing against my rope community. They're all fun and 20,000
Rope is
hours to set something
beautiful.
up. If you want to spend 20,000 hours doing it, absolutely. It's not for me, but I'm not going to tell people
That's
you can't
fine.
do it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I believe what my responsibility and FetLife's responsibility to do is to fight for both. So I am going to fight for the right of people to say, hey, you know what? I don't believe race play should be a thing. I have this hypothesis that it's not institutional, it's internalized racism, whatever it may be. I will fight for your right to express that. Just like I'll fight for the right for people who are into consensual race play to practice consensual race play. Where we draw the line is like, whoa. There's no reason to go and bash somebody for it.
Absolutely, 100%. Look, and that's where I'm at. Like, I'm all for the discussion, no matter where it goes, and the uncomfortability. And when that all arose, there was quite a few people I wanted to talk to about it. But at the end of the day, it's just about talking. But the moment you start, and I warn people now, I've had to do it on my post at the bottom of my post to say I put this thing that I call care, and I think it's about, what do I say? Be constructive. Let me find it. I'll tell you about it real quick. Because about a year and a half ago, the bashing for me got really bad, and I'll never forget. Like one weekend, I sat for the whole weekend. I felt friggin' terrible, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I saw a couple of other therapists
Because
who
you
had their own
care.
version,
Because you
because I do
care.
care.
Good.
But my thing was, be constructive, be authentic, be respectful, and be engaging. But if you violate that and you start insulting me, or as you insult somebody else in my thread, you're blocked. First, I'll delete you, and then I'll delete the comment. And the second, because you're giving me the ability to delete or block, then I move to block. I'm very happy to say I've got 2,500 people blocked. Not a problem. What they are into has nothing to do with me. I curate what I want to see. You've given me that ability. I actually use what you've given us to make my experience on your platform better. I sure as hell don't bitch about it. There's stuff I don't like. I don't. The OnlyFans crowd, God bless them. You do what you want to do. We don't have anything in common. It's not a kink. It's not BDSM. It's not a lifestyle to me. As far as the community goes, I have nothing to do with them. Best of luck to you, but I do not engage. There's nothing wrong with that. I just have but I'm very open about it, and that's fine. Everybody's got an opinion. But what I don't do is I don't go out and go, you're terrible people and you shouldn't. I don't do that because it's a waste of my time. I believe people have a right to exist. I just choose who I'm going to interact with.
No, that's
and it makes my experience on your site so much better, and that's why I enjoy it. I heard though, is it true that we all only have a limitation of 5,000 blocks, or is that just one of the Fetlife myths?
I thought it was 10,000.
Oh shoot, I don't know. I got told. I heard the other day. I don't know. It was the other day.
Or
That was a few months ago.
Or is it
Somebody said
20,000?
I don't know. Somebody said it was like 5,000. I'm like, holy Christ, I'm halfway. I'm halfway there. So it is what it is. I mean, look,
It's very blocking is one of the most difficult things on the servers because if you think about
really,
yeah, it's a majority of sites do not allow close to that much. Most of them allow 500, 1,000. Because what happens is every time we open any thread,
right,
any activity feed thing, anything, anywhere, we have to go through all the love and say, okay, did they block any of those people, or did you block them? All the comments, right. Okay, any of them block you, you block them. Okay, we got to hide it. Then we have to hide the subthread. It is, it's one thing to do it with 1,000. It's another thing to do with 100,000. We have people there was somebody with like 150,000 blocks, which is the biggest one. And we're like, hey, you know what? Could we please reduce it? And they're like, yeah, you can just delete them all. I'm like, what? Like you blocked that many people. Why delete them? I was like, oh, I was just experimenting with something. What are you?
Oh, God.
It's like, what? But there was over our limit. There was only like 50 people over our limit.
Right.
And then we let them keep their block list. They just can't add any more over 20,000. But it is very, very hard in our system. And I've been fighting engineers for over 10 years. And finally it got to the point where I couldn't win that fights with engineers anymore. And I'm like, okay, let's allow it. We tried to reduce it to 5,000, but then I fought with the engineers, I think, to reduce it just to 20,000, I think it was.
Oh, that's good to know. I'll probably be one of the first people to happily get there. Doesn't even bother me. Not even offended. But that's because I'm a little bit more outspoken about certain things. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. There's plenty of people who don't like me and they block me. Cool. All the power to you. God bless.
Well, by the
You
time
know,
you do get to that limit, which will probably be another 10, 20 years from now,
not
that
really. The rate I block about 30 to 50 a day.
let's say 30 a day, 365. That's, oh yeah, it's 10,000 a year.
Huh? I've done the math.
Okay.
Give me another year and a half. It won't take me that long. Sometimes it's more. There are days like it's like I'm shooting them down in a peanut gallery and I'm just block. Look, it's certain content has no relevance to me, and it's there is a modifier I look for on certain profiles if I'm going to interact with people, and if I see that modifier, then I don't interact. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't hate them. We just have nothing in common, and I know we're not going to have a conversation.
Is it Shibari?
So there's no point for me to say.
Is it rope?
Shibari? Yeah, the rope people. Yeah, I would have to actually pay you to give me more blocking. No, look, there's a guy I really respect. He's in Perth, and I brought him on the show, and I really think the first time he's in Shibari, I really truly admire what he does. But he's also a sadist. So there's the other part of it, which is really why I wanted to talk to him. So he ropes. It's like I joked. I said it's kind of like cattle wrangling, right? You rope him, then you beat him or brand him. Yeah. And I just because it's true. At least he gets that in there. So I quite enjoyed that part of it. And I've talked to rope bunnies as well from Oregon to Melbourne to wherever, and I know they want to talk to me. They try to convince me that somehow I'll be converted and never going to happen. Like I can tie a really good rope and
Are
knots.
you being closed-minded or you've tried it?
Nope, just don't like it. I've tried it.
That's
I've
fine.
tried it. I've had mentors that were into it. I've got friends who are like, come on, just do it again. Nope. It's a time consumption thing. And I'm of that whole, it looks cool when it's done, but I've already finished my scene, went to bed. You're still like checking your rope, so it is, everybody's got a place, but I think that for the rope community, they're just devoted to rope, and that's great. When I'm in my private life and I'm doing that aspect, like I'm going to be here in a few weeks, I'm thinking of really devious and terrible things to do to a human being that they're consenting to, because that's what sadists do. We just think of shit. And we sit around and think of devious shit, like making you wear a helmet where water fills up just below your nose while you're getting spanked, being suspended on your tiptoes with tea lights, those tea candles below your ankles.
I think about donuts. When I have nothing else to think about, I think about donuts. And you think about that. You're a much more interesting person than I am.
Yeah, but I mean, I do think of the toll, like, of all of this. Like, I really do. Like, I can't imagine having to navigate a place like this. I've ran a couple nothing near this scale in my life. Back in the day when you're young and you all everybody experiments with coding. I was in my early 20s, and I realized I couldn't. Math and me don't work very well. So my mom was a space defense. My dad's an engineer. My brother went off to be a fighter pilot at the Naval Academy.
Oh, wow.
By the time math got to me, it said no, which is kind of why I like psychology. And then I found out when I was in school, you got to use statistics and research analytical data. And then there's all these signs. And I'm like, what? That's not why. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the only class, stats, that I struggled in. But all the rest, I'm fine. But it's the same. If I never didn't do this, if I actually didn't do anything in my life, I wanted to be an astronomer, quite honestly. But I can't do the math. It's too complicated.
Oh, there's a lot of math in astronomy? I'm sorry, I don't.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's all computational data and trig and calculus 4. And I respect it because I had a really great professor when I was young and in school. And we had to go do a field trip, and he showed us a supernova that happened like 3 billion years ago. And so the neutrinos were hitting the planet. And it was you didn't see anything but these little dots, but it was just amazing. And it was his passion. And I'm like, I want to do this. And then I found out all the math that was involved, and I'm like, nah, forget it.
But like the therapy thing seems very natural for you. And it's always best to go after what you're naturally inclined.
And I wanted to do that. You know how school is for all of us. Yeah. But when you're in school for 18 years, I got told early on, like, oh, you want to do this? It's another 12 years of school. And I'm like, I'm not going to be in school till I'm 30. I can't do that. But subsequently, I picked up 2 masters along the way. And I've, I've got 2 masters, 2 bachelor's degrees, ton of other, I've got to do continuing education all the time.
So I guess you could.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I've been accepted to programs. I just don't want to go back because all of that's more about research. I don't want to research the
Okay.
community. I just I like being on the front lines to help people understand things. But my job is to challenge the notions of what we're thinking to help you get to the next part. Which is why when you were talking about people pleasing before, because I see it all the time, it doesn't help. But if you're comfortable there, that's not my job. Isn't to help you change it, just to help to make the behavior better, and so you're functioning. But if you function well, then you're right. Who am I to say otherwise? But of course, you're not coming to me for that. That's not what we're sitting and talking today. Mine is more about, that's why I didn't want to do this whole origin story with you, because I've listened to your other interviews and they were really great. And there's something that I think what you did with Authentically Kinky was great. They're a good podcast, like a couple of the other ones. And I've seen your written interviews before, but I wasn't curious about that. I actually talked to a colleague of mine who's actually on Fetlife, and I'm like, I'm going to try to get this interview.
Uh-oh.
It's right when I was emailing you about the metric stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to take my shot and say, you just owe me an interview for this. And when you responded and I told you, I told her, and I said, I don't want to do this. I want this, but help me put together something that therapy, but it's not therapy, because that's what I'm curious about. I don't care if 500 people, I've got 4,500 people who follow me on a couple of different platforms on my podcast. I don't care if they all listen, because at the end of the day, I'm doing this for me. And I told that to somebody the other day when I said, I finally told everybody, I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit down with you. And I was really excited, so excited to share that. And then the constant couple of the strife messages I got, I said, at the end of the day, I'm not doing this interview for you. I'm doing it for me, because I want to know these questions, because I'm curious about how, if you go back and talk to yourself before you launched Fetlife, what would you tell yourself?
Is that a question?
That's a question. Sorry, yeah, I should have. That's actually a question.
But
yeah, that's a question for you.
What's the context of the question?
If you could tell yourself anything different, like, would you have said, do you know what, dive into it or rethink this?
I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah,
I wouldn't change anything, because the whole thing is like, you know what you know at the time you make a decision. So the only way I could change things is if I had more knowledge or I knew something different.
right.
So I'd have to go back to myself and say, hey, by the way, all these things. Okay. And sometimes even if somebody knows all the answers or knows they shouldn't be doing something, the only way to truly learn is to go through life experiences. So
absolutely. That's how we learn. We learn more from our failures than we do our successes.
Yeah.
Because just because it looks great on paper, that doesn't mean it was a win.
Yeah. So like, there's a lot of things I've done. It's like only after I've done and screwed up where I'm like, oh, that's why people tell you not to do A and B. Yeah. Now, like I didn't see it. Now I see it, and it hurts. So like,
everything's an evolution that we do. We learn from the past. We even go back, we revisit ideas from the past that we didn't implement then. And I don't care. Look, whatever you've got coming, I'd rather it be a surprise. I don't want to, hey, I'm dropping this. No, because I don't care. I'd rather like be the kid on Christmas when and I get to go open that present. Now, whether it's going to be a pair of socks or like a Voltron doll, I'll find out.
It's it's like, I feel like that was the wrong answer that I gave you, but it's not wrong for me.
No, and that's what's important, because it doesn't matter if I'm not swayed whether what you tell me, and others too, I don't think they're really that swayed whether your answers always are going to give them the answers that they're looking for. Because again, you can't. You still have to find what means why you did this whole gigantic global connection. And what it means to you.
And people who might get upset with that answer, I can understand, like, hey, but like you did this that hurt this person. Don't you wish you didn't do it? Yeah, no shit. Everything I've done that hurt somebody, I wish I didn't do it. But I didn't do it maliciously. I did it because I didn't see C around the corner, and it's like, shit, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And now you learned something.
Sure.
Uh,
We can't anticipate everything. It's like when we talk about the community, I can tell you 1,000 reasons and give you 1,000 risk profiles or something, but it's going to be the 1,001 that I didn't see. That's not my fault. I just didn't know, you know?
the one selfish thing I get out of all this is that, and when I used to work for people, I was always jealous of the CEO, the boss. And I was jealous because of only one thing. It's not because they had the power or anything. It's because they got to stress over the decisions and they got to make the decisions and learn from those decisions. And
Right.
my favorite thing about this role is or a lot more in the past, I make less decisions now, but is that I got to make decisions and then live with the ramifications of those decisions. And when you have to live with them, you learn a lot. You're like, shit, I heard this person, let's iterate. And I was able to grow much faster than maybe an average person would grow because I just had to make more. The more decisions you make, the quicker you learn. The more impactful decisions, the quicker you learn. So I learned a lot. Yes, sometimes at the expense of people, positive and negative.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm sorry. Did I just bring down the mood?
No, not at all. Because I mean, for me, it's again, that's more impactful and humanized, and it makes it. I take away. At least you're not robot. You know, you're not some weird AI Elon Musk robot that's doesn't give a shit.
I think Elon Musk cares way more than anybody knows.
I know, I agree too. I'm not even going to have that fucking discussion because I don't
Sorry,
think people.
I won't have it then.
No. I totally agree. What I mean is that you can't. There is a lot of care. I look at what he did for X, and I think it's great. And I don't care that he charges because I'm there. I don't even, he did what he did. He made his money, but he also kept an ability for freedom. I am curious about one thing because I know what my country's doing, and I know that I see I call it fear mongering because it's actually what it is. But the reality is there any concern, and I'm sure you work on this with your legal department, about the stuff going on in the States and Fetlife somehow being blocked or made more restrictive as far as age verification? Would that even affect you in Canada?
So it affects us in each country that we operate.
Okay.
So
Are there any countries in the world, real quick, sorry, that you guys can't operate in or are blocked from?
I don't think we're accessible in China.
And where?
China.
Interesting.
I don't think we're available in some countries. China is the first one that comes to mind.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, they have a different context when it comes to expression. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So the country right now that we're dealing with is UK. UK is is requiring age verification for any site that has adult content. That includes X, that includes Reddit. So that's the one we're working with now. So if I remember correctly, I have the date somewhere, but like by July 16th. We have to have stuff in place to make sure we are assuring that everybody who's logging in from the UK is of age.
Well, I'll let you do that announcement on how you'll probably deal with because I know data and stuff comes up because I worked in that world and people will be, the concerns and all that. But I'll let you, that's not why I'm.
But yeah,
I understand that's got to be, that's got to be taxing.
But the one thing that we're all pretty pleased with is that the UK is not forcing a certain solution on us.
Right.
That they might make recommendations and they're allowing us to go with other recommendations and say, hey,
okay, good. They're giving you a little bit of autonomy and wiggle room.
They're like, hey, you know what? We believe that anybody who's been on Fetlife for X years is over 18.
Sure.
So you cool with that? And they'll be like, yeah, we're cool with that. So yeah, they're it's going to become tougher, and in all countries.
Sure.
All countries to a certain one day. I believe all countries one day you'll have to be 18 to reach sites like Fetlife or see how it comes on Reddit or Twitter or whatever.
Do you have a problem? Do you think is that okay with you?
I'm first a father. So is it good for business? Absolutely not. Well, I never even thought about it. I know as a father, it's good for parent. it's good for my children.
As far as them being required to be 18 to be there?
It makes
Yeah.
because when I was a kid and you were a kid, like this stuff was hidden behind doors.
Oh shit! I knew there was a place in my city. If you paid a quarter, you could buy the like dirty newspaper magazines. Like they had all the ads.
Yeah,
When we talk about print media,
yeah.
and I would go 9 o'clock at night with my friends, and we would park down the street. We'd have our our 50 cents. We'd go get it just to look at the stuff, and it felt so wrong. We shouldn't have been because I didn't even understand what it was. I can remember seeing ads for like I didn't know what a dominatrix was at 16 or 15. I didn't know.
But
And all the other stuff that was there, the dirty, go to the triple X shop, buy porn, and all the other stuff that they were. I had no idea what it meant.
I find kids, from the conversations I've had with my daughter when she was younger about the birds and the bees and things she was seeing in school, other kids. I think they learn too much too young.
I agree,
and that
psychologically, I agree.
Yeah, and that making this less accessible, harder to get, is a good thing. Now, at the same time, they need to make it still easy to get for people of age. What I do hope is that the Apples, the Microsofts, the Googles, whoever makes the phones and the computers and the operating systems, make it so that you just prove that you're 18 to the operating system. Mm-hmm. And that the operating system says, hey, this person is 18. This person using this phone is 18, so that nobody has to send us or some
that is
third
way
party.
Beyond my capability.
Yeah. So
it's a lot of intrusion for me.
Yeah. And that's what Pornhub, and that's like, if you think about it, if you have an iOS device, there's a good chance that Apple has your credit card, so they know how old.
Android, for those who are awesome.
So, but it's possible the Android App Store has your credit card or whatever. So,
sure.
Instead of having to give that information to all places, every single site where you're like, just increases your chance that it's getting stolen or whatever. Or it's scary to give your stuff to everybody. I get that. So I hope that the operating systems, implement this into the operating system to make it work, so it's seamless to members from user experience perspective.
Sure, I get that. I see a problem as far as my data being on a phone. That's a whole different. That I could talk with you privately, because I was an electronic technician in the Navy, and then I moved in because I've done intelligence work, and I'm going to leave it at that in a very broad stroke in DC. But I understand data, and I'm not even in the near. I can't even see the ballpark where Snowden played. But I understand how we use and collate data.
Yeah.
And I've even recently heard the joke that crypto is getting made with algorithms by governments to track not only criminal organizations but their own people. I don't even want to branch into this because I could probably talk to you about that for hours, but outside of this. But yeah, I know people worry about privacy and all of those concerns. It's going to be, I'm glad I'm not the person at the end of the day. Hopefully I can elect the person who's going to make the right decision for me. And then I have to live with that decision until I can, if I don't like it, then replace them with somebody else who will change it. But I'm getting old enough where, I want to move sub-rural and far enough from a city where I don't hear anything, but close enough I can get my stuff and enjoy life, raise some fur babies and go from there. Cause that's my happy place, and not far from the Med, because my next stop is Europe.
Nice.
But that's why we have dreams and goals and all of these things in life. So I'm going to leave you with the final question today, because I know I appreciate all of your time and everything. And I do got a client coming in 45 minutes.
No problem.
If for all those people who are going to I hope for all the people who are going to listen, what do you want some of your users who do listen to take away from this conversation about you, not Fetlife?
I want them to take away I can't tell people what to take away. Right.
I know, but if you could, what you would really want them to take away from it about you? I love reflectionary questions. That's why I'm a therapist.
I'm trying to figure out if it's even fair to answer that question, because they've already taken away what they wanted to take away or what they've seen. and something that was not even covered in this interview, and it's not your fault or whatever, is that, and I think it's because you brought up the Snowden and all that stuff, is that, and some other questions before, is that always for some reason there's I don't know if it's not Occam's razor, but it's something like that where everybody is like they connect a dot and they go B C D E F. Okay,
Sure.
John works for for some organization and is trying to steal data to do this, to do that. I'm like, holy shit!
I know. I've heard that one. That was a fun one of mine to go down the rabbit hole.
That's a huge stretch. Or it's much simpler than that. I think that people should. What I want people to realize that it's usually the simplest answer is the correct answer. That I'm not doing things for malicious reasons. I'm not doing it to hurt somebody. That, or whatever the case is, that it's like, oh, it was a misunderstanding, or we thought something and thought it wrong, or hypothesis was wrong.
Sure.
We didn't do views to attract more people from OnlyFans or to attract more influencers.
Sure. But change is slow too. I mean, you have to understand, just like you're saying, you're going to try something out. If we're going to put in the ability that everybody can hang their little water cup in, you have to try it out to figure if it's feasible.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're spending money to do that, or it's costing you money.
Yeah, for sure.
It's capital.
Yeah.
And I get that. That's why I'm more appreciative. I made a joke a few weeks ago. I was talking to somebody because they were talking about some of the features if you're a paid member.
Yeah.
I think it was something about the AMA.
Mm-hmm.
I literally had joked in a 2-second conversation. I'm like, oh, no one loves me enough to do that. Not because I don't want to contribute, but I don't actually spend a lot of time on Fet.
Okay.
And so somebody bought me a subscription.
Oh, wow.
I was so overjoyed and had 2.5 hours of a conversation with somebody for doing that. And I said, I don't only thank you, and I extended a thank you from the bottom of my heart. I said, but I thank you for what the support you're giving to them, for allowing me to come here and then speak to you. Because I feel that way. And it was overwhelming for me. But I don't ask for that type of stuff, but it was just really like, and then I went through and I noticed all the little the nuanced features. And, I think it's not that I don't think it's a bargain, but I mean, I'm just saving for a house. So for me, every little dime, I got a penny pinch away.
I believe that we're in the best time of the world ever. And there's so many amazing people out there. I was just with my daughter. My daughter plays wheelchair basketball, and I went with her to her tournament, and we had the afternoon off at the end of the tournament before the plane back, and the whole team, was in a supermarket, in a shopping mall. And my daughter's like, she loves Subways. So she's like, okay, there's Subways over there. I'm going to go get the Subways. I'll meet you back here. I said, okay, cool, sweetie, thanks. I'll be right here with everybody else. And she went to Subways and she came back. She's like, somebody bought me a sandwich. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I tried to tell them, like, please don't buy me a sandwich. Like, I can afford it, no problem. But they bought me and they said, just pay it forward. Like,
I love that concept. I mean, I've seen it get out of control sometimes, but yeah. The one I saw it was what was it? I think it was a McDonald's one, and somebody behind them ordered like $800 for the McDonald's. I was like, I'm not paying for that. It's like, sorry, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, I'm buying a Happy Meal. That's it. I'm not paying for that person's $800 meal.
Yeah, I think that probably was. Yeah, that probably was a joke or something that somebody like. Yeah, that there's more to that story. But yeah, I think that people want to do good.
We do. Yeah, there are. I have to fundamentally believe that, not only because of what I do, but because of what I've done. Even when I approach that in the intelligence world, I still have to believe we're doing things for the right reasons.
Yes.
Not because I agree. I didn't agree with everything any prior administration's ever done, but I understand why we did it. The needs of the many sometimes outweigh the needs of the few. Do I agree? Well, now we're talking about morality. Christ, we are going to have to sit down again and just have this discussion.
Part 2. Nope.
So, but yeah, no, I understand. And it is that hard dichotomy. I do, when I approach any conversation on a place like Fetlife or any other social media or my personal interactions, I try to find I always, even if something's terrible has happened, what lesson did we learn that was positive from it? Anything we can take away, because that's how we shape and rechange our behavior instead of being so pessimistic to hopefully being a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
And maybe the world needs a little bit more optimism. I know everything's politically turbulent back in my country. I get it. But nobody was going to be happy no matter what way it went. And every country that goes through any type of everyone's going to be unhappy because somebody didn't get something that they wanted. But
it's always been like that. That's nothing
it's
new.
always been like that. And we just have to learn to accept it and move forward, and then work it, and then go through the next round and see what happens.
And there's always positive and negatives at every single one. There's no such,
sure.
There's no, it's hard for me to believe, and I'm not a historian, but it's hard to believe that there's any presidents out there where it was only negative.
No, I can't really. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't really think of it. But I mean, yeah, I can. Well, I mean, I can think of a couple of dictators throughout history.
That's not president.
No, they're not presidents. They're just rulers. Yeah. But look, John, I really do appreciate you sitting down, talk to me today. I would love to, and I'll definitely stay in touch. And especially on the other subject, I'll email you if I see
please.
it. And
the plagiarism.
But I'd love to have you back, because this is more of what I like hearing from your side. That hell, even bring R4 Ramon on with you. I'd love to talk. He's from Belgium, isn't he?
He is.
He is. Love it.
I would invite him here, but I don't know where he's. Look, give me half a second.
Sure.
So you can hear his voice. He's looking at me funny because he's like, "Why the hell are you calling me?"
That's all right. That's totally fine.
Yeah, he might show up.
Nah, that's all right.
Your hair looks
I'm
fine.
not sweating.
Your hair looks fine.
Hey.
Hello.
I didn't do my hair, so
that's quite okay. I'd love to bring both of you on again in the future and sit down, and
especially get next time.
Some of your.
Oh, man, I'm already stressing.
Don't be. Everything. Listen, I'm a therapist, so that's not even a thing.
I can feel it. The voice. Like, I already feel more relaxed.
I don't look today when doing this with John. This is not about an origin story. This is him and everything he's created with all of you, and there's so much to that story with you all. I'd love to know, especially like where you come from, because you're coming from Belgium. I know I'm very familiar with the scene over there. And
really?
Yeah. Well, I've been around.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. I've done BDSM on 30 different countries and about 3-4 different continents now. Yeah. So 26 years in the lifestyle, and been fortunate to meet so many people. But now in a new role, I kind of help them navigate when there's issues, or not. If I'm helping them, about consent or talk about relationships or attachment styles, I do all of that. And a lot of times I just actually do it for free. I don't charge them for it. I just do it because I want to help the community, and because they don't have the resources there. But I love how Europe is so convolutedly different than from like the Mediterranean region to the UK to Iceland, of all places. It fascinates me so much. Mm-hmm. But that's what I was just telling John. I'm like, next time I have to have the both of you on, and we'll talk about all that stuff. Because I've seen your profile. Like when I first saw you were like a programmer. I saw it and I'm like, he's a fetishist. I'm like, I need to go read his profile. And I started reading and I'm like, I wonder if he's really into all that. I need to ask. And then that eluded me, that question to email you years ago. But
it's R4 you were asking me like what happens to Fetlife, like the future of Fetlife after me. Nielsen is already suggesting I retire. He wants me out. No, he asked me twice the last 2 weeks when I'm retiring. But no. But like, and I let people make more and more decisions. I would say that R4 is making more decisions than me lately. It's been at least a year.
Product-wise, yeah.
He's the head of the product now, not me. Like, it doesn't mean he doesn't ask my opinion.
Sure.
And I give my opinion, but at the end
on everything, it's always done.
So basically, when everybody in the community wants to really start complaining, they should complain to your email box and not John's.
No. It's at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. I don't want to be distracted by that.
No, it's actually great. I like that the community reaches out to me as well, so I better understand them, not just John. Because right now we use his profile to get questions answered, in a
Right.
broader way. When I ask a question, I maybe get a love on my status update, and that's it. So
Yeah.
it-
Yeah, I know how that feels.
I think it's
I
because
know
you're
how
too
that
good
feels.
looking.
sure.
Nobody, they look at me.
Well, I mean, because it does get curious too. If you put like you're in the community at all, like you have, I sometimes wonder because I mean, it was for me. You have to understand. I'm like, is he really? Are you really a fetishist? Are you really a rubberist? Are you really like you? And then you want to ask, and then you feel stupid for asking the question.
Yeah.
But
Nielsen
you
doesn't
know,
like latex at all.
no.
Yeah.
Well, but because what it does is I think it humanizes you to another level that they know that you're not just a programmer
Yeah.
doing this for them.
No, he's
you're
our,
actually-
to be clear, he's a COO. He runs the company day to day. He's not
Right.
He's like, he does have his background is programming and design, but
I started as a product designer.
he started here as a product designer, and
Wow.
then slowly or quickly moved up to running product and running the day to day operations of Fetlife.
Well, when you need a chief psychological officer, I am happy to put forth my resume.
Totally. I think the team would use you too much.
Yeah.
You know what? I've got a client here in about a half an hour.
Yeah.
This will be, I'm well over 100 people this week. My group is a lot.
It's like, whoa.
20 people a day. Yeah. And that's okay. I love it. I thrive with the military people because that's who I love to give most of my time to, but the rest of it. So I'll end this week with about 100 and something people seeing, but I'm charged. Like when I'm done today, disconnect for a while, go hit the gym, gonna go out and have some nice dinner, make some nice food, and recharge. And then I set myself up for next week. But I'm like you, John, now, like I used to stay up till 2, 3 in the morning and then boom, up at 5 and I'm up and go. Now I can't do that anymore. I'm like in bed at 11.
Oh, I'm 9.
You know,
I'm 9 p.m. and I'm up like at 8. So, and I just sleep in my bed.
But yeah, family life and downtime, all that stuff's important. Well, look, I appreciate this and your time, but I would in the future, I'll coordinate with you and our former Ramon to do another joint interview, and I'll pull Ramon. I'm gonna pull your life apart. We're gonna go through all of it. And we're gonna humanize the shit out of you, right? We're gonna talk about all your daily operations and how much that affects you and how you carry that weight.
He's more interesting. He's way more interesting than I am.
No, this gave me a complete, because look, I didn't come into this thinking I knew anything. I had to leave everything I've heard or read about you on there, like, because that's it. There is nothing. And coordinating with your assistant was great because, you know, she's telling me about all the stuff that you're doing. I'm like, Christ, that's busy. Like, if I think I'm busy, I mean, in the Navy, I had then a corps of 200 sailors that were beneath me. I was busy, and that's not a lot of time to do shit. So I get it. I understand. But, you know, now that I'm in private, I'm kind of at that point. I'm like, I'm really curious more about you. And that's why, like I said, when I contacted my friend, I'm like, I need to structure this. It's like therapy questions, but it's not, because I'm much more curious about this stuff and how it affects you. I don't mind that we have differing opinions. I don't mind that you want to save the world, even though I know you can't.
Thanks.
I'm not going to convince you otherwise. I'm not here to do that, though.
All right. I know you have you need to recharge.
Yeah.
Group session.
I got to get going here in a second. But look, again, I thank you so much. Appreciate everything. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.